grab a neighbor by the hand as we hang the text around this topic. And I want you to declare it unto your neighbor to shake it loose.
Shake it loose, my.
Look at somebody on the other side of the church and say, hey, you over there.
Hey, you over there.
I've just come to tell you to shake it loose.
I just come to tell you to shake it loose.
Now look at somebody behind you and say, yeah, you right there.
Yeah, you right there.
Shake it loose.
Shake it loose.
Shake it loose. Shake it loose. And I'm not talking about your tambourine or your salt shaker.
All right.
But there are some things that have you bound. Some folk that have you locked away. Some situations that have beat you down. Tried to steal your joy. Took your position. Repossessed your car. Took your home. May have even taken your stuff, your money, and sucked the very life out of you. But one thing they could not take was the favor of God. You are to look at somebody and say, by the time I leave here today, I just want to be free.
By the time I leave here, I want to be free. I am.
You see, the trap the enemy had set for you, God is here to redeem you from the hand of the enemy. God is here to redeem you from destruction, redeem you from sin and shame. Today, the Spirit of the living God is here to expose some things and not some people. Here to expose the snare of the enemy. Here to expose the fowler of the air. Here to expose the wiles of the devil. The Spirit of the living God says, tell my children not to be entangled with bondage of their flesh, but it's time to shake it loose. I know that it's Father's Day, and happy Father's Day to all of the fathers, but there are some men walking in bondage. Society has stripped you of your fatherhood, made you feel less than a man. Even some women in your life have cut you so deep with their words and even tried to turn your children against you. But today somebody ought to scream that God wants you to be set free. And time to shake it loose. I need about 10 folk who will determine to be free, who's determined to change your situation, who's determined that I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, sick of going through the motions, sick of having church and worship service after worship service, but nobody leaving changed, nobody leaving any different than they came. I need about 10 folk this morning that would open your mouth and travail in the Spirit. Come on in, Zion. Don't let the enemy paralyze you on today. All I need for you today, if you really are designed to be free in your mind, free in your spirit, free in your heart, you ought to open your mouth and travail in the spirit realm. For God is here to set the captive free. How do you know, preacher? Well, I'm glad you asked, because the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, for He has anointed me to preach the gospel, first to the poor, and then to those who are captive in their mind, to set at liberty those who have been bound, those who have been struck down. I dare 10 folk just to open your mouth and scream right here. Come on, right here. I need about 5 more folk that'll open your mouth and travail in the Spirit. For God says, I've come to do a work in you. I've come to do a new work. Prince of Peace, you ought to scream. You ought to be swinging from chandelier, because the trap the enemy thought he set for you is nothing but a setup for improvement. It might be a temporary inconvenience now. It might be difficult now, but the Spirit of the living God is here to set you free. All of that bitterness, all of that hatred, all of that unforgiveness that's plaguing your heart, it's time to travail in the spirit. You've got to let out a wail because the enemy is on your track. But if you travail in the spirit of the God, it's saying, I will shoot you to a place that's beyond the enemy's reach. If you would travail with your mouth, the spirit of the living God is saying that I'll block you from the snare of the fowler, that 10,000 would fall at the right side, but it won't come nigh thy dwelling. Don't worry about me. I'm going to preach as if the church was 100 full or if it was packed from the choir stand, but I need you folk, children of God, to go with me because I'm working on something and going somewhere. I wonder if anybody came to hear a word from the Lord this morning. There was a question asked of me some time ago. This question was so heart-gripping that it troubled me for about a year. I found myself with no answer to this question. And I guess this question had to first search me before God had to iron out some things in me before I could tell his people about it. But let me stop right here just to drop a spiritual footnote. And just because you think you have it together, you're saved and on fire for God, doesn't mean that you won't be tested. In fact, it just simply means that the enemy will come after you with a club in both hands, looking to sift you. In fact, our leaders are under attack more than the lay people. But don't think for a second, just because you hold the microphone in your hand, you know how to hold your back and run across the floor at the right time. You know how to pray heaven down. Don't you think for a second, because you know how to speak in tongues or prophesy or operate in the word of knowledge, that you don't have some things in your life that need to be shaken loose in your life. Because the truth of the matter and the reality of the situation is that we have all sinned and come short of the glory of God. And just because God's favor covered your mess doesn't mean that you don't have anything to shake loose. Look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, it's time to shake it loose. Back to the question that I was asked some time ago was, how can you get to your future when the things of your past is still your present?
Oh my God.
So I come to ask you this very question. How do you plan to reach your destiny when the things of your past are still your present? How do you plan to get to your future when cheating is still your present? How do you plan to get to your future when sexual immortality is still your present? How do you plan to get to your future when bondage is still your present? When depression is still plaguing you? When past hurts are still manifesting themselves in your mind, in your relationships, and in your life? Nudge your neighbor and say, neighbor, we got to shake loose. Is there anybody here ready to be free? Is there anybody here ready to be free in worship? Free to lift your hand and don't worry about what your neighbor is saying about you. Free to lift your hand and don't worry about who seen you last night. Free to lift your hand and not having a flashback of images or Blakely's. Free to lift my hand and don't worry about who seen me on the street corner. Free to lift my hand. Free to do my dance, for my slate is clean and I'm on my way. I wonder if there's anybody here that want to be free. Y'all looking at me funny, but I know I'm telling the truth. It doesn't matter what you say, because whom the Son set free is free indeed.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Here in this text, you know the story